Some signs of Slaanesh slaughter and slay to slink up the slipperiest slopes of sensation. They savor every second, seeking sacrilegious and sordid spoils to satiate their senses. After all, sobriety and salvation alike are so stifling, no? Better to slake your thirst for sin and send yourself spiraling into the most succulent, scrumptious, and oh so satisfying of stimulations. And Slaanesh shall not suffer herself the sight of a simpering simpleton, satisfied with sorry and sad experiences without stopping to see what they could be selling their souls to she who thirsts for. She wants those whose sentiments send them searching for her and her sensual spectacles of ceaseless sinning, a screwball who will send themselves to stunning summits of self-wrought slavery to their own selfish desires. And of them all, simply none of these slimy, savage sense freaks have sent Slaanesh such sensational sacrifices, seen such mind-shattering showcases of sapient debauchery as Sigvald the Magnificent. Slaanesh shall ensure Sigvald shines forever, for his sprees of spiteful and spontaneous sorties into Warhammer's south are an endless source of certain satisfaction to the most scandalous of the divine scourges of civilization. Sit, so I may share with you the story of Sigvald, a script of the most supreme of all of Slaanesh's unceasing army of simps. But before I talk about a magnificent character, would you like to hear about how you could be having a magnificent time? Because you can with Adam and Eve, the sponsor of this video. Adam and Eve is only the finest and most curated selection of adult toys known to mankind. If you can think of a way to have some fun with the things that make you go bump in the night, then you can find it here. Whatever bits you may be packing, Adam and Eve has just the thing for them. But it isn't merely full of fine additions to your potential collection, because Adam and Eve knows what's up. They know that sometimes discretion is the better part of valor, which is why they have completely discreet shipping. No need to worry about a package being left on your door for a bit too long and seen by the neighbors. Adam and Eve has your back. They've also got a 90-day return policy and 24/7 customer service for any potential issues that may crop up, which is some damn fine customer service. And if that doesn't speak for them, how about the fact that they've been in business for over 50 years? You don't survive that long if you aren't a quality company. To get yourself a little something to spice up the nightlife, look no further. Click the link in the description and pinned comment, or go to adamandeve.com/pancreas and use code pancreas at checkout for 50% off one item, plus free shipping in the US and Canada, and free rush processing. Some exclusions apply. To get yourself a fine piece of pleasure, you can do no better than Adam and Eve, so check them out today so tonight can be all that more interesting. Now then, I am never writing that much alliteration again in my life. Sigvald is one of those people that from the start was a real bad egg. And when I say start, I mean from the moment of his conception, because Sigvald's parents were a brother and sister pair of Norskins who were a bit more friendly with each other than is socially acceptable, as it were. But hey, the Habsburgs practically made that a sport, so maybe I shouldn't be so judgmental. He can still turn out alright. And as far as birth defects go, he was fine. No Charles of Spain nonsense to be found where he baffled chaosdom by continuing to live. There was, however, a tiny little horned birthmark on the back of his neck, which is a bit troubling going forward, to say the least. As Sigvald grew up, his every want and need was met. If Sigvald wanted it, Sigvald got it, and I do mean every want. Money, conquest, someone to sleep with. He got all he ever wanted and never really had to work for anything. Eventually he did overstep even the generous bounds allotted to him, however, as his desires only grew more and more obscene and horrific. Come the day his dad found out Sigvald apparently loved the taste of human flesh, and he was officially banished from his tribe. Sigvald initially pretended to be devastated, consumed by grief as he was being cast out from all he had ever known and the life he had grown into. Then when his dad went to sleep, he killed him in his sleep. And I think he also ate his dad, just for good measure, you know? His next course of action was ironically enough to take care of the banishment on his own, however. Sigvald had a good hard think and figured that a man as awesome as he was would do just fine wandering into the chaos wastes, and I will remind you that he is a man who up to this point had literally never known struggle of any kind. By all rights, he should have been devoured by monsters or worse after an hour tops, but Warhammer is the kind of setting that sometimes rewards that much arrogance. The very next day, when he was wandering the wastes, he came upon a hidden valley that had somehow escaped being twisted or corrupted or devastated by the constant warring that marks the chaos wastes in Warhammer fantasy. In it, he met a demon of Slaanesh who continued the trend in his life of giving everything he ever wanted. He was given the power to achieve all he desired, legions of supporters, and all for the low cost of Sigvald giving himself wholly to Slaaneshi degeneracy. As I'm sure you noticed, he was doing this anyways. For most other characters, this would be nonsense even by Warhammer standards, but honestly, it makes perfect sense. That's what Slaanesh is all about. She's empowered through these sorts of acts of debauchery to the extreme. Giving Sigvald the power to do everything he ever wanted was feeding her just as much, if not more, creating history's most disgusting infinite feedback loop. He would then go on to gather more and more followers over the course of hundreds of years, none quite matching his own extremes, but all of them certainly willing to try. And because Sigvald is Slaanesh's perfect little princess who gets all he ever wants, here's a quick rundown on some of his abilities and other gifts. His armor, the auric armor, is pure gold that heals his wounds gently and tenderly so his perfect skin may never be marred. On that note, he also looks eternally 21 years old in his prime, because aging is so unsightly, isn't it? The armor is also self-cleaning, ensuring he's never sullied with battlefield gore and whatnot, which if I remember correctly is actually a thing in Total War as well. Even with blood turned on, he's the only character that never gets bloody. His sword, Silver Slash, was forged from a shard of Slaanesh's own blade, and so is incredibly powerful and of course aesthetically pleasing. And because of course he'd have something like this, his feet are perpetually an inch or so above the ground as he walks. This isn't for flight or to help him on the battlefield, but so that the earth doesn't sully his feet with its grotesqueness. His followers he's amassed aren't safe from his whims, as any he finds too ugly or annoying he kills on the spot. This doesn't stop more from showing up, presumably for the same reasons VTubers have a fanbase. Hello any VTubers watching this video, I hope that comment wasn't in too mean of spirits. After a few hundred years he had gathered himself even more impressive of a legion than when he started, and in his book we actually see where he spends a lot of his time. There's a palace that's only a few days away from the border between reality and the realm of chaos, and Sigvald sure enough tells a character that he has come to the edge of the world. It's a snowy spot of the world, and when I say palace, I really mean massive collection of palaces all jammed together. They're covered in statues to his likeness made of pure gold and gemstones, and the buildings themselves are all as grandiose as you'd think. Some of them are in various states of disrepair, no doubt when some Khornate or other took offense at the gall of this Slaaneshi, but Sigvald has evidently weathered all those potential sieges. Basically, anything you can think of can be found at this place, and I do mean anything. He had an elf singing a death song he found incredibly beautiful once. So beautiful, in fact, that when he was on a balcony listening to it, he pushed one of his servants to their death because he really wanted to appreciate the moment. He has a magical astronomy dome where every single light is tracked, and he starts confirming that quantum physics nonsense is real and particles are attracted to the repaired particles across the world. This dome could be used to track the stars, of course, but also to predict fate, and sure with perfect clarity you use it to track the movements of your enemy. Sigvald uses it to see when particularly interesting guests might be arriving, which indeed he did for the character in his book we spent a lot of time following. He essentially has omnipotence at the touch of his fingers, and he uses it to keep track of party guests. In no uncertain terms, he also admits to corrupting people for his whims, telling one of his servants that his latest guest was here to join them, but he just didn't know it yet. He really is awful. There's labs for strange surgeries where screams can be heard coming from, a library that would make any college in Altdorf feel impotent next to. All of this, and I do mean all of this, is solely there because Sigvald on a whim wanted it. And as per the actual contract he made with Slaanesh, whatever Sigvald wants, Sigvald gets. While not at his level, his guests are equally insane as him in some ways too. There's the standard assortment of demons, of course, that's a given. But there's weird fleshy blobs with wings colored bright pink, old and decrepit corpses still walking, presumably because Sigvald doesn't want them to die and so they don't. There's a garden where more poetic guests fall asleep in, and their dreams create fruit. Some of his guests are Elden Ring doll people, which on the one hand, why the hell are those here? But on the other hand, if I could invite Ronnie to my cookout, I would be killing people for the pleasure. Did you know he had a wife? He had a wife that he essentially kept locked up. He butchered a whole city just to kiss her hands because even as someone as arrogant as him found her beautiful. She walks around with a veil over her face and leather gimp strips over her everything else. And in some of these moments with his guests, Sigvald displays things that are almost reminiscent of kindness. He opens one speech by saying that though he may hold the title of Guild Prince, all of those he gathered were princes. After all, Sigvald would accept nothing less than royalty in his presence. He clothes, bathes, and feeds his latest guest, an Imperial who marched an army north for salvation from his enemies because he wants his company. He can, in fact, be a generous host. All of that should not be taken as anything but him feeding his whims. There is not a single good bone in his body. All of this is for his amusement and what he feels he deserves, to be surrounded by the best and most beautiful, even if beauty is clearly more subjective with him than it is with anyone else. One of his personal guards has his armor sewn into his flesh with hooks and his face is heavily scarred, but in some whimsical way, Sigvald must think it looks good, otherwise he wouldn't be there. He also animated the fella he pushed off a balcony earlier, but as a screaming head animated by clockwork, so either beauty beauty is something to Sigvald that's incomprehensible to us, or he just has a fetish for clocks and meat hooks. According to himself, he doesn't actually care much for war. He finds it dull after hundreds of years, and that extends to the point that there was a Khornate champion he basically allowed to march across his territory because he didn't feel like dealing with the guy. But this is a wargame setting after all, so he does march to war, he just doesn't call it that. Any conflict he's a part of isn't him going to war, it's Sigvald going to do what Sigvald wants. He wants to go slaughter a Khornate champion just to see what an artifact of Khorne feels like when he wears it. So he does. His followers will march alongside him, not because he needs them as an army, but because they're his, and so they must go with him as well, and because he needs an audience to see how kick-ass he is. Sigvald does not go to war. He punishes those he thinks have slighted him and makes glorious entertainment for himself and his servants. Case in point, how about we take a look at the time he invaded Ulthuan? It should be said that even though it was probably because Slaanesh gave him all the power he needed for it to work, he is one of the few people to successfully land on Ulthuan for an invasion. This is where the impressive things immediately stop, because Sigvald is not good at war. In fact, I would go so far as to say that Sigvald is terrible at war. Some context first. As you may be aware, elves are naturally beautiful and hotter than anyone else, and their hair is luscious and flowing and super pretty. This is not simply my bias speaking, this is fact. Sigvald too had heard of this, particularly the bit about hair. Naturally, this would not stand, and so he decided to invade Ulthuan in order to wipe out the race of beings better known for having good hair than him and his golden locks. On the High Elf side of things, we had the Asur known as Eldyra leading the defense. Aside from being a High Elf general and therefore well trained, she was the squire of no one less than Tyrion himself. You can safely assume a level of kick-ass going into this already because of that, and as any good general knows, she needed information before acting properly. Thus, defense in depth was her game plan. Instead of amassing a great force on the shoreline waiting for Sigvald's horde, she allowed them to march some distance inland of the island continent. The entire time, however, she was gathering reports from scouts, harassing the invaders, be it through quick skirmishes by Illyrian reavers or shadow warriors burning the supplies of the Chaos Force. Magic weaved across the sky, not to smite the invaders, but to confuse them and conceal her own forces, and the Chaos host was left wandering the kingdom of Kothik blindly with essentially nothing to show for it. On Sigvald's side of things, meanwhile, we have the never-ending carnival. At a certain point, even his own forces had enough of this nonsense, because they had killed like a dozen elves tops by this point in exchange for constant, miserable attacks from the shadows. Sigvald faced challenge after challenge after challenge against him at this point, all of which he accepted and won, and not once did he stop to think he should be doing anything else. It came to a head against a fellow named Dranak Goredrinker, a warrior of chaos who was a cut above the rest and wanted this bullshit attack over hair to be over. He and Sigvald dueled for hours, an impressive feat for Dranak, but it was in this moment that the High Elves struck. Their cavalry and archers rained down from above, decimating the Chaos forces in one fell swoop. It is noted that if Sigvald had just paused his duel to the death against Dranak, he probably still could have won, but that would mean Sigvald letting a slight against him stand, and obviously that shit don't fly. So while the High Elves were busy tearing his army several new assholes, Sigvald finally killed Dranak and then left. Not out of fear, not because he knew defeat was at hand. That's far too mundane a reason for Sigvald to retreat. No, Sigvald left because after he killed Dranak, his blood reminded him of a bottle of Bretonnian wine he once had that he wasn't a fan of. So he went to burn down the town it originated from instead of Ulthuan. To sum it up, Ulthuan had to face a massive chaos invasion, which only stopped because the asshole in charge was angry his drinks weren't up to par, which is absurdly stupid. Although in saying that, at the same time I'm realizing that I'm out of wine as I'm writing this, so I can to some extent understand the rage that happens when alcohol is in question. And for that matter, Malort is the kind of liquor to drive someone to rage with how dog-ass it is. In fact, the longer I think about this ending of the invasion, the more I can understand Sigvald wanting to rend that town asunder. Even when he's ostensibly on a more important quest of some sort, he doesn't stop being an arrogant little prick. One day, Sigvald was attacking the province of Ostland, because of course someone was attacking Ostland. Against a warrior priest of Sigmar, he suffered the grievous and devastating wound of chipping his nail a bit. Theoretically, he was there to claim the skull of a keeper of secrets, which he eventually did end up doing. The reason he gave for the expedition was just to avenge his chipped nail though, and I fully believe that his rampage was mostly motivated by that rather than the greater demon relic skull. It doesn't matter his armor regenerates him, and even if it didn't, Slaanesh herself probably would. This stupid barbarian chipped his nail, time to glass the entirety of his homeland. His army was incidentally defeated even though he got the skull, but who cares? Certainly not Sigvald, beyond whatever entertainment was lost by their deaths. He has a personal honor guard, which in Warhammer isn't anything too special, but his really takes the cake. They're called the Mirror Guards, so named because their shields double as mirrors. These are not magical mirrors designed to do something like reflect spells back at the enemy, or even copy them so they cancel out. No, their shields are just mirrors so Sigvald can at all times bask in his reflection. Slit a guy's throat open, strike a JoJo pose for the mirror, resume slashing, and repeat until the battle is done. That's how Sigvald moves. His book, as far as he goes, is largely him being a freak in various different ways, but I want to call attention to an event roughly a third into it. The characters in it face a Khornate warband and they defeat them. During the fighting, one of Sigvald's favorite toys, for that's all you can call the followers that he cares for, takes some damage and goes down. Sigvald lets out a cry of rage and goes catatonic almost, while one of this mirror guard takes down the Khornate by way of removing his armor and jamming the flesh hooks that kept it attached to him into the Khornate. The enemy's defeated, not slain, but reduced to a quivering pile of meat. Sigvald's associate turns out to be fine, and Sigvald feels embarrassed over his concern. I bring up this moment because I feel like it really highlights how Sigvald from the outside looks like a heroic character in some ways. He's beautiful in the way your average Prince Charming is, a dashing figure that captures the heart of all who look at him. He supposedly shows concern for his allies, falling into shock if they're harmed. All of this is a front. Sigvald does feel these emotions and is beautiful, but it's all surface deep. Sigvald does not care for his compatriots beyond what fun they provide him. He does not fall into rage because they were harmed as people, but because his toys are being smashed. His beauty, of course, is skin deep. Beneath the surface, you can find no greater rot in Warhammer than him. Fulgrim is perhaps the closest character I can think of to him in 40k, but the difference is that Fulgrim fell to chaos. He once was great, and is now nothing but a rampaging hedonist. Sigvald never was great. He was never a noble person brought low by circumstance and his own flaws. He may call himself magnificent, but he's been nothing but a monster in the skin of a man the whole time. Slaanesh was the greatest source of irony in the end times. In order to end the world, all of the Chaos Gods chose their greatest champions to bring forth the eradication of their enemies. All of them, except Slaanesh. Slaanesh was having too much fun with the Warhammer world, particularly its elves, to want to destroy it. So in an act of restraint, she sent her weakest champion to be her envoy of the apocalypse, which funnily enough, was Sigvald. At the start of the end times, Sigvald had moved on from destroying Kislev alongside the rest of the Chaos Horde and ended up destroying the Bretonnian city of Paravon and had turned it into his own little carnival of horrors. No doubt plenty of people were eaten by him, and I'm sure at least half of them were still alive. Slaanesh plucked him out of there and transported him to Middenheim and gave him to Archaon to command, which rather displeased Sigvald, but Slaanesh is about the only being he'd ever listened to, so he had to suck it up. Archaon tasked him with defending Middenheim with an army of Slaaneshi demons, which he mostly did, or at least his demonettes did, because for instance, at one point, Valten showed up. Sigvald and two other Chaos figures were present, but Sigvald did not fight. Sigvald sat lounging on the sidelines while the other two fought and died to Valten, and then Sigvald said he deserved to fight only the real Sigmar and left. And while this might be giving him credit he doesn't deserve, I'm not sure if I believe him or not, and I don't mean that in the way most people say that phrase. Genuinely, I can't tell if he was afraid of Valten and was masking it with arrogance, or if he legitimately thought this fight was beneath him. He's such a piece of shit, I'm tempted to just take him at his word on why he didn't want to fight Valten. Whichever is true, either way he's still alive by the time of the final battle, and once again leads some demonettes against Chaos's foes. Archaon tasked him to work alongside Throg the Troll King, which he found disgusting, and so instead he gave Throg what he thought was a lethal wound. Yes, the what he thought part of that sentence is foreshadowing. Eventually, though, he comes into contact with Krell, one of Nagash's top warriors at this point, and the two fight. They're fairly even for a while, but Krell manages to give Sigvald a pretty grievous wound, to which Sigvald sees his pretty face ruined in a shattered mirror nearby and goes apeshit. He obliterates Krell without a semblance of skill or grace or anything like that, just pounding his own fist into dust to do the same to Krell's face. And after Krell's defeated, he sits down and starts crying because his face has been ruined. Keep in mind, he still has his magical armor on. He would have regenerated in short order and been perfectly fine, but all that mattered to him was that in that singular instance, he was not pretty. And then cue Throg the Troll King. Throg did not take kindly to his attempted murder, and so he takes revenge by smack-talking Sigvald a bit, killing him, and then pissing on his corpse as he died. Thus ended Sigvald the Magnificent in Warhammer Fantasy. A more fitting fate for one such as he there never was. Of course, that isn't where his story ends. GW decided the worst human being to ever live needed to return, because what's a story without a good monster? Between settings and in the Age of Myth, Sigvald's soul was left floating around on its own. Seemingly abandoned by Slaanesh for dying right before the final victory, his being was eventually found by Nagash, who remembered him as quite the little troublemaker to say the least. He didn't just unmake him or use his essence for armor though, because that'd be a punishment far too mundane for Nagash. Instead, he trapped Sigvald's soul into a shade glass mirror that he also enchanted to always show a perfect vision of whoever looked into it, ensuring Sigvald would never be seen again. He then chucked it into the city of Shadespire, a city that Nagash would eventually itself chuck into the realm of Ulgaish for pissing him off. This would prove to be the key to Sigvald's salvation, however, because unbeknownst to Nagash, Ulgaish was where Slaanesh was imprisoned by the elven gods. So close to his patron god, Sigvald was able to absorb little tiny bits of her power over eons. Eventually his mirror was removed by some Carrigan overlord dwarfs, but he had regained enough power to enchant even a dwarf, and they all died in a desert unable to look away from the perfect reflections they saw in a mirror. That part of the story is basically the Narcissus myth from Greek mythology, which, fun fact, I was in a play for as part of a class in 5th grade. I accidentally cut off a girl's entire speech because I forgot where my lines were, which, to be fair, is a very Narcissus thing to do. Anyways, after this, Sigvald's mirror was found by a group of Slaaneshi followers known as the Scarvet Cavalcade, a godseeker group, which means they were looking for Slaanesh. They of course stopped to look in the mirror, but this is where Sigvald acted. He used all the power he had gained from Slaanesh to conjure not a perfect-looking image of the Chaos Lord in charge, but the most horrific thing he could imagine. I assume it was just an image of Throg, but his balls were hanging out. The Chaos Lord was a Slaaneshi one, so obviously greatly offended and smashed the mirror, and thus was the attention of Slaanesh drawn to the whole event. Slaanesh was impressed with Sigvald's little stunt and decided that he'd once again be your favorite bestest boy. His body was not only returned, but made greater than ever before, with divine strength flowing through him. In order, Sigvald did the following events. He killed a good 6 of the Scarvet Cavalcade to flex off his new muscles and power, and because he could, which because he is Sigvald naturally didn't stop the rest from bending the knee to him. He then went on a rampage against the trolls of Age of Sigmar, either not realizing or not caring that Throg was the only intelligent troll there was, and he was essentially murdering a bunch of animals because one of them bit him an entire reality ago. And his third act is another spicy bit of revenge. On Sigvald's once perfect body is a scar he keeps hidden from anyone else. Turns out between Krell and Throg he was pushed past what even his regeneration could handle, at least coupled with his death. Throg and Krell are dead though, so he set himself on a new target, Nagash. Now what could almost be called character growth though, he has not made plans to march to Nagash's R2.0 and start fighting the god of death. He knows even he isn't a match for Nagash and doesn't want to get chucked into the magical black hole that is the Shyish Nadir, so instead he set his sights on Nagash's stuff, particularly the Osiarch Bone Reapers. Aside from that, he's a bit catty with another Slaanesh character, Glutos or Scullion. Glutos is all about the sin of gluttony, of course, and Sigvald detests the fat bastard for it. Sampling the finest of foods is all well and good, of course, but not to the extent that you look like that. They were made to behave with the arrival of those 2 twins of Slaanesh a little while ago, but chaos being chaos, I'm sure they'll at least have some passing blows every now and again. Since having a sword made from fragments of Slaanesh is no longer that special in Age of Sigmar, he now had her finest smiths cook him up a new one named Slash, forged from the pieces of the mirror he was imprisoned in. And in his downtime, he spends his time in his makeup tent in the All Points. Because of course he does. For lore positives of Sigvald, this is the most Slaaneshi character ever to exist, for starters. It was in his soul-bound contract that in order to serve Slaanesh, he has to do whatever the hell he feels like. He is such a freak that Slaanesh didn't make a single demand of him, because she knows damn well he's gonna do whatever she'd ask of him anyways. You cannot embody a Slaanesh faction more than with Sigvald, so if you like Slaanesh, you should absolutely get him. In addition to this, Sigvald is also perfect for a Slaanesh army, primarily consisting of mortal units, though this isn't in the tabletop positives bit because this isn't for tabletop reasons. To me, it just makes sense. He's shining on the outside and rotting on the inside, so it feels very thematic to have an army based on that. Load up on models like the Mirmadesh Painbringers for a similarly themed aesthetic, and go to town as you LARP as a knight in shining armor to disguise the fact you are the filthiest of degenerates. He's of course, as a returning old world character, good for those of you following plotlines and involved characters as such. Well, admittedly, his Age of Sigmar plotline is going to be more of the same, just against different people. That also means that if you liked him as he was, he's still the same and you can enjoy him the same. All that's really changed nowadays is that his playground has gotten bigger. And to end us off, since these mini-segments tend to be short, Sigvald is a great character to play if you too are a staunch hedonist, because hedonism does not need to just be sex, you see. The man who spends all his waking hours drinking, not out of trauma and stress, but because he just likes being drunk, is firmly in the category of a Sigvald enjoyer. If you want the finest of silks for your clothes and always dress your best at the expense of your finances, he's a banger model to get too. For those of you who know you sometimes take enjoying something a bit too far, you cannot get better than he. As for tabletop positives, he's come to the mortal realms ready to party hardy, to be sure. At 190 points, he ain't the cheapest lad around, but he's worth every single one of those points to be sure. With a 3-up save and a 4-up ward save alongside 7 health, he's quite tanky, especially by Slaanesh standards. He isn't the fastest at only 6 inches of movement, but that ain't too much of a problem. And he's got a control score of 2, if that really matters to you. At present, his attack stat line is brutal, with 5 attacks hitting on 2-ups and wounding on 3-ups at Ren 2 and Damage 2. Anything without a ward save is going to be feeling the hurt, to be sure, and his special abilities all make him oh so much better at doing this. First off, you don't get a ward save against him. You just don't. Now, at only 5 attacks, you might think that, alright, that blows, but he can only deal 10 damage max, right? Just throw a blob of chaff at him and it'll be stuck there for a while. Also incorrect, because when he charges, if he rolls a 6 or higher on the roll, he gets that many attacks. So potentially this dude is rocking up with 12 attacks, especially important because this is based on the roll and not the distance. A 2-inch charge can be as devastating as him making a 12-inch charge. And he has strike first if he charges, just for the cherry on top. Sigvald's tabletop positives are very simple. He's gonna face fuck anything in his way until it stops moving. As a final upside though, since that's really it, his model is beautiful. They didn't pull any punches when it came to upgrading Prince Charming from Hell, so if you want a standout centerpiece, he's one of the best there is. He also has the armor version of assless chaps if you rotate his model on the web store, which is fitting. As for lore downsides, he's one of those chaos characters where there is nothing redeeming about him. Chaos forces as a whole are all awful, but sometimes you can at least understand what drove them to it. The original Norskins all lived in a frozen wasteland where worshipping chaos was about the only way to survive. Plenty of Imperials in 40k, from citizens to marines, are driven to the Dark Gods from the abhorrent treatment the Imperium gives its populace. Sigvald is not that. He was rotten to the core from the get-go, and it only got worse as he gained more power. If you want to pretend to have some measure of moral high ground, he should stay far away from your army. He's also a character that doesn't really have much in the way of proper motivations, with the only one he really has in AOS being damn near unachievable, at least by him, since there's no way he's bringing down Nagash, such is his power. Most of the time, too, he just does whatever he wants. It's fun, but that kind of thing rings a bit hollow for an epic character from a world of legend. I too don't like looking at ugly things, Sigvald, no one does, but as far as motivations go, it's a pretty weak one to obliterate an entire city. That is the entire point of the character, but if you want more than that, you should stay away too. Although in saying that, this is a Slaanesh army, so I assume that on some level, if that bothered you, you'd just be playing another army. It's all about doing whatever you want here. This is a rather specific lore downside here now, but when playing Sigvald, do keep in mind that you are deploying a model who in lore died by way of having a troll smash his head in and then pissing all over him. And I'm sorry, but death by golden shower is not the sort of thing anyone's reputation really comes back from. Quite frankly, I wouldn't be shocked if the pissing thing was his main motivation for waging war against Nagash, just so no one remembers that ever happened. This is definitely a bit of an odd downside, to be sure, but I feel it's important to bring it up, because with him in your army, your opponent can look at you, call you a little piss boy, and be entirely right. Although again, Slaanesh, for all I know, that might just turn you on. As for tabletop downsides, those are very simple. He does nothing for your army. He murders like no one's business, but that is all he does. No buffs, no movement shenanigans based on having them, nada. Turns out he has not learned how to wage war any better than he did in the old fantasy days, so just keep it in mind. As much as I did talk about how good it is, as a single melee hero, he can be vulnerable to getting tar-pitted by weaker models. Potentially having 12 attacks will absolutely ruin the day of any clan Rat horde he charges into, but there's also the times you roll the 2-inch charge and don't get to use that rule. You have to carefully choose his targets, not because he's weak in prolonged fights necessarily, but because without doing so, you aren't going to be getting any value out of him. On a final related note, as a big scary melee monster, your enemy's going to naturally be very afraid of him. Understandably so, because he's brutal, but he's a fellow you're going to have to use proper positioning with to get that melee use out of him. Beware hordes of range units taking shots at him, and make sure that not only does he get into the fray early, but before the fighting starts you've positioned him properly. Besides, this is good for lore reasons too. It wouldn't do for someone as sensual and significant as Sigvald to suffer such a sham setback because a certain player shoveled him into the south of your soldiers. And that was Sigvald the Magnificent. A bigger freak than he has never existed, because at least most other Slaanesh units are either demons and so inherently like that, or mortals who fell to their desires. Sigvald is just like that, but he's just a guy, and may he continue being the worst for years to come. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the mirror guard to my Sigvald, allowing me to gaze into the endless beauty that is myself even when I probably have better things to do. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching and take care out there. Sigvald, more like Sigbald. He isn't bald, but I bet if you shaved his head and called him that, it'd really piss him off. He'd kill you for it, but that'd get to him real good. Sigbald, you idiot. God, I am running out of material so fast it isn't even funny.